Welcome to the 2 Month Review, the weekly podcast brought to you by Open Letter at the University of Rochester, in which we take a giant book, break it down bit by bit, and we talk about it. We, I think we laugh. We had this conversation last week of whether or not we tell jokes, and based on part of this book that we'll talk about, I'm not sure if we tell jokes and don't laugh or try and laugh and don't laugh correctly. I don't know. We do all sorts of stuff.
Sometimes language is a prism on which we hang dreams skyward, or something like that.
Is that
I
a
don't
quote
know.
from the book? I mean, that's not impossible. So.
No, I made it up, but it just sounds like I'm trying to sound smart and poetic.
Anyways, we take a book, we talk about it, we have a good time. We are reading for this season Tomb of Sand by Geetanjali Shree, translated from the
Nailed it.
Hindi by Daisy Rockwell. I listened to the pronunciation like 4 times right before I hit play. I was like, I'm on this. I'm not going to screw this up. I am Chad Post from Open Letter Books. I'm joined as always by Brian Wood, author of Joy Time Killbox. How are you, Brian?
Oh, hot as hell, but loving it.
Yeah, right on. Got the button up today or matching. We're fancy.
I'm gonna take one down. It's getting a little hot. Here we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
you gotta like every couple of minutes. There's no air in here at all, so
Yeah.
I feel you. And joined also, as always, by Kai Straumanis, editor at Open Letter Books and translator from the Latvian and German.
Hello.
How
Yes.
are you?
Guten Tag. I am fine, Chad. How are you?
I'm okay. I am on this week's journey into Chad's sobriety mission. Our sponsor is Go Brewing, that has this nice double IPA that has no alcohol and all the sadness. So we'll try this one out live on air and see if it's any good.
They make this thing called water that you can drink. It's not alcoholic.
You know
Just
what?
saying.
Water
You
is for
don't.
fucking losers. Water drinkers aren't trying hard enough, is what I think. They're just like settling for the easiest option instead of making life more interesting.
This makes you feel fancy because it comes in a glass bottle. It has Italian writing on it. So
Italian writing. So we're talking about Tomb of Sand, which, as we said in the last podcast and on the intro article to this season, that this won the International Booker Prize in 2022, was the first work from India to do so. However, I mean, it was like the ninth winner of the prize, so like, but it's within like a reasonable amount of time that it
were
won.
they British judges?
Yes, they're all British judges. So
Wow, that's really big of them.
I know. I mean, I don't know who was on this particular committee. I mean, sometimes it's like Sarah Jessica Parker on the main Booker
That'd be like
committees.
us giving an award to the other Indian.
Oh
Only, only Tommy Orange, Sherman Alexie, and whoever did ceremony can win awards. Nobody, there are no other
Henry
American
Silko.
native writers. Yeah, that's all we got.
Something. Yeah, the
Oh
fair.
my God. Oh my God.
So, so as a work of Hindi, though, there's things we could talk about related to the award, and we'll talk about the book itself. Which for this particular episode, we went up to chapter 20, which I have the Indian version, which is published by Penguin Books in India, and so that's page 94 for me. For you two, which have I know Brian, I do want to talk to you because I know you listen to the audiobook instead of reading it. Kaya, you have the American version, and I know that it's a different page number for you. So our
That's the
pages aren't really going to
version.
match.
I'm gonna have Kaya's version as
71.
well. Yeah.
71.
71, which surprises me because you have 20 pages on us. And this
But
is
it's the
already like eight. Yeah, this is already like 8 words a line.
dude, there are so many blank pages on this. Every chapter starts on the recto side, and so there's just like page after page of blank pages, and
Mm.
like the margins are wild, like very wild. I wanted to
I
see like,
just realized I stopped at 10 because I thought it was 1 to 10 for some reason. It's just I have 10 fingers. It seemed like illogical. So
oh,
okay.
so you don't
Yep.
understand my joke about laughter.
I'm good for half of this.
You're
I'm like,
gonna
dude, I
you're
don't
gonna
remember. I have decent retention. I don't remember hearing that at all. But no, that's fine.
That's so funny because you didn't react, but it's like a very prominent part of the book. It's the longest chapter in the section we
Yeah,
read.
it's like 20 pages.
It's like there's like a huge chunk of it, and
Yeah, because
we'll get
I
there.
got to chapter 10. I was like, that's pretty quick. Huh,
That's
interesting.
right.
All
Yeah.
right. That was like 45
Quick
minutes,
week,
no big
quick
deal.
week.
Nice. All right, cool.
I mean, that's 30. That's actually 30 pages.
So I got it completely wrong.
That's cool. No worries. No worries. You'll make it
Sweet.
through. Um,
Yeah.
and but I want to get into the book itself. But before that, I want to do a little bit of information setup for you guys. is that namely, I went to the translation database, which is really runs from like 2008 until about 2021 and needs to be updated after that. So the information in here is a little bit suspect. It's always a little bit dicey if there's a publisher that publishes a book overseas and then distributes it in America, because I'm only tracking books that are available in America for the first time. However, 2008 through 2021, how many books were translated from Hindi, do you think?
And published in the States?
Published in the States.
15?
I'm gonna
Lower.
go 30.
Lower.
8.
Eight. Exactly eight. Two by Uday Prakash, which was translated by Jason Grunbaum, and two by Tajani. What was that? I had it right. Geetanjali Shree. Two books by her and two books by Uday Prakash. So really, we're talking about six authors from Hindi who have been published in that 13-year period. So that's pretty bad. I can look right now as like how many are from India. These are works of fiction. There were more works if you eliminate fiction. There were works from other children. I think there's a children's book, but there's definitely poetry as well. So that number's really restricted there. However, if you look at all of India, it's 51. So there's a lot from Bengali, Tamil, Kannada, so on and so forth. However, for Hindi itself, that number of eight seems very low for a country that has so many people and so many writers and so much, which was a place I actually wanted to start before we get into this, is how many books from India or from Hindi have the two of you ever read?
I think I've only read American or British novelists that have Hindi heritage and culture, but not actually translated.
Agreed. Yeah, I that makes sense to me. That's kind of what I was thinking too. I'm looking right now at my own list of every book that I've read
I
since the
would
year
be curious
2000.
how many Hindi novels are published versus how many are translated. I imagine it's going to be a very low, that percentage is going to be pretty shocking.
Yeah, I think that I was looking for books at some point in time when I went to India, and we'll get into this in a future episode, but I have a ton of books that are from India itself that are a mixture of were written in English. Most of them are written in other languages and translated in English and published in India, and yet have no distribution in America. This is like one of the big problems with like the Indian book market and the world of translation is that there seems to be from my trip in March and talking to a lot of translators and publishers and what you call it, academics and whatnot, that there's a really thriving book industry in India of translations, but they're all sitting there in India, not being pulled out. Even so far as that, when I talked to Penguin Random House, Penguin India is like the largest publisher in India and is part of Penguin Random House worldwide. However, Penguin and Random House outside of India have nothing to do with them and do not distribute their books outside of that region. So we're very like cut off, which I think is the point that I was going to make is that there's only so many books. I've read three up till this moment in time, two of which are not, or one of which is not available in America. But was one of these books I got from this trip, which is very cool. It's like it's a book I want to publish. It's kind of got a little bit of Beckett mixed with a little bit of like a 70s experimental film a la Pavements. But it's very cool, not available outside of India. So, in terms of like learning about Indian literature and Hindi literature specifically, we are at such a disadvantage. And it seems so weird because we do have a lot of like Indian American people living in America that would be interested in these books, you would think. And also like for a country that has such a huge population, such a huge impact on the world that has all the stuff that we know about, like we don't through literature, we don't know much of anything, which is surprising to me, how low that number is. Even if you include all the books from Indian languages translated in English, 51 over a 13-year period is pretty low by in
That's
terms of
insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And while you guys are talking, I'm thinking I mean, I know that I've read the two books from India that Open Letter published, but I've never focused so much on the individual languages that those have been translated from, just from the whole country,
Yeah,
which is a me problem and something that I would like to rectify. But
I
um,
watched the trailer for Life of Pi. Does that count for
totally,
anything?
$100%.
I don't know who the author is or something Mattel, I think, but
Yeah, a, a
I did
Canadian,
watch the trailer.
a Canadian who who plagiarized a South American writer, Jan Martel,
Oh, okay, cool.
upstanding citizen, literary citizen. Well done,
Mm,
buddy.
mm. So
Yeah,
that one doesn't
fuck your
count?
movie too. So, but there is a Nobel Prize winner. So Tagore is the Nobel Prize winner for literature. They also, I suppose, Nepal, however, like not in translation there. But Tagore, I think that's how you pronounce it. Rabindranath Tagore, 1913, winner of the Nobel Prize. He's the other one that I've read stories from, but I don't have a record of having read ever a full book of his. But he's very, very famous, and there are a handful of people like that. However, it's kind of shocking. I kind of knew this going into it, and I will be, at least I will, if not all of us, be talking with Jason Greenbaum, who helped set up a program at the University of Chicago called SALT to promote literature from India in translation. And he has more statistics, more data, more information on
Mm.
this to talk about. So we will have something to fill in. But I thought, like, beginning with the framework of, like, okay, so it's unlikely none of us are well versed in this. None of us have like some sort of beat on like what Indian literature is, what Hindi literature is within Indian literature, how these things relate, what languages are doing what sorts of like, structural ideas, or which ones are more experimental, which are more literary. Are there any that are doing like noir, science fiction? We know kind of essentially none of that. What did you expect out of this book when you got started?
For it to be a long time because it's a big book.
It's gonna take
I
forever. It's like my version
I have
is
no
780 pages,
expectations.
by the
well,
way.
especially if
Yeah.
you're reading, and Brian's doing the 4 month reviews, reading 30 pages at a time.
Yeah, exactly. I take my shit slow,
Doing the
dude. It's a
scenic route.
10 course meal. All right. This was just the amuse bouche that I just had. Um, no expectations.
Okay.
Like I just have a basic, vague idea of like the cliches that I would like assign to Indian literature, which isn't fair, isn't helpful.
But
Um, but yeah, like just I'm expecting like a big family story that's quasi like magical spiritual with, like poetic and kind of big and grand and goes over generations is kind of my guess. Like a sense
Mhm.
of time, a sense of place. Like that's kind of like would be my guess, but I have no clue.
Kaya?
I mean, to clarify, the author I was talking about that Open Letter published is Subimal Misra, who's a Bengali author, so I know that's not from the Hindi, but I expected this book to not be that because that's all like he's a completely different type of writer, and just based off the fact that this won the International Booker Prize, I figured that the only thing I expected is that this would be closer to kind of like down the center in terms of literature.
Comprehensible. Yeah, Subimal Mistra's books are like wildly experimental, like to the point that like whoever whoever is trying to front about like their cool new experimental translation from a male European author, this goes way beyond that. Subimal
Absolutely.
Mistra, as does Attila by Elio Chacol, but like we don't need to have a pissing match over what experimental stuff is. But Subimal Mistra is like way out there. And I knew it wouldn't be
Absolutely.
that either. And I was with you, Brian, in the sense of like expecting something, oh, this isn't translated. Vikram Sath's A Suitable Boy is like one of the big famous books from India and writer from India. This thing is fat. Like in this printing is literally 1,474 pages. And it is, from my understanding, very much that kind of like multi-generational family novel. A marriage is at the center of it. There's kind of like that element. The other one that I compared it to is like Rushdie, like Midnight's Children. Something about like the
Mhm.
partition has elements of like magical realism, is much more like a grounded family story. And the thing that I suspected or was sort of concerned about, and the reason that I'm reading the Indian publication and not the US one is that I was curious about what the kind of terminology would be, because one of the things they run into with a lot of Indian books that are translated and published in India, based on an essay by Jason Grunbaum and talking to people, is that there are a lot of terminology that's based within like Indian life that you wouldn't explain, but that an American wouldn't recognize. So like it can be clothing, food, cultural things, but also some slang words, stuff that like would be very, just part of the English that's used in India. Like that English is different from American or British English. And so if you were to translate all those words into like American English, an Indian reader would be like, this is fucking nonsense. Why are you doing this? But then if you don't do it, an American reader would be like, I have no idea what any of this is. It's kind of the situation of the Subhamal Mishra book, is that there's a lot with like caste and politics that are beyond anything that you would a normal reader would know off the top of the dome. They wouldn't have any clue, and they need to do a little bit of research to like figure out what's going on. And I was
Mhm.
sort of like always going into this. I was like, that's one of the things I've encountered in reading and dipping into stuff is like sometimes I'm like, I don't know what this is. I have to do research. And I had a suspicion that this would have that. And that's why I was reading the
Is
Indian
Daisy
one to see what
American
happened.
or is she
Daisy's
American or
American.
American? Because there's an interesting word choice in there that really jumped out at me. It was hullabaloo.
Oh,
It's in the first 10 chapters. Um, but yeah, they use the word hullabaloo, and it's such like the last time I heard hullabaloo was maybe like Dylan Thomas, August Bank Holiday,
really?
a hullabaloo of balloons. But it's like an old, it's a more British word.
Huh.
Um, and I might be wrong, but I don't
Oh,
feel
well,
like it's not a very American word. And so like it popped at me like that must have been there must be some word that does not make any sense. And like the closest thing that you might be able to get to, it'd be really interesting to know what that word was. I obviously don't, but hullabaloo really jumped out at me at what an interesting word. I hadn't heard in forever. So it was neat to experience that, encounter it in the first 10 chapters.
Mhm. Why I was pointing it is because I'm looking at the copyright page.
oh, and are you going to say that the book was published in Britain? I don't know if the
It was originally published by Tilted Access. Well, it was like first published by Tilted
Aha.
Access.
Okay.
So that
so
Okay.
explains your British.
So it's, although
Hmm.
hullabaloo I've heard as an American
Yeah.
word, I
But
think I've heard it within like a sports context, in fact.
I
It's
mean,
super dated though.
yeah. I
It'd
mean,
be like on the
I
Flintstones. What's this hullabaloo going on in here, Betty? Like it
I'm
doesn't
now
it
super
doesn't
curious about this.
the
um
etymology of hullabaloo.
I think, but
Uh,
there were also a few other words, not hullabaloo, but a couple other words or instances, Brian, where I also kind of clocked like, oh, I wonder if this was initially translated for a more British English audience. Or also if that's just, the
And I typically question that
English
harder
that would be
with
used in India, right?
with like things translated from Asia in particular, like from the like Mandarin or Cantonese. Like there's so many like these characters that how does that work to an English word? Can you get it? How close can you get it? I always feel like I might be missing something. And especially like culturally being so like richer, deeper, longer.
Hmm.
There's so much that could be missed in a translation, and so I, c- I don't know. It's annoying for me because I feel like I'm missing out, and I don't want to miss out on anything. And I feel like oh, I'm probably getting like 75%. It's still really good, but oh,
Yeah.
I want to be like 80%. Come on, and
I don't know.
that's on me. But
Yeah, two things really. That one, according to the Google Ngram viewer, the most popular period of time for the word hullabaloo is between 34 and 49. The second most popular time for it to appear in print is 2013 to 2021.
so again,
So,
very rando word, right?
yeah,
Bring
it like
back
cycles back.
hullabaloo.
It like very much goes down and then comes right back up like recently. And
Huh.
I don't know if that's like the cyclical nature of things or if it's just like that's a fun word to say. Like, why
It is
not?
a fun word,
I feel
hullabaloo.
like they said, I feel like it's been said recently in terms of a baseball scrum. But I might be, and I just said fucking scrum. So like, forget
It's a
it.
full-on hullabaloo.
So, yeah, that's all. Look at the hullabaloo going on down in that dugout, like that sort of thing. The other thing was like with Indian mythology, with Hindi mythology, that's something that like when I was there and talking to the host that I had and his friend who's a translator, they were naming like stories, gods, like different like elements of this stuff based on like we were at a museum and there'd be a painting. They're like, oh, that's this person. And they would go into the whole mythology of like they had like an affair with this guy who was this person's brother who did this, who did that, and like all this stuff that was like so long. Like the thing that the story they told me was like giant, and I was like, I've never heard any of this. And so like something I have a fear, and I'm foregrounding all of this as fears and as this because I wonder about the general reader a lot right now in terms of approaching a book like this, and if like the fact that there aren't that many books translated from India is partially based on the perception that American readers are kind of like not into figuring this out. That there is like there's such a deep, rich history that feels somewhat different than if you were to like be like, oh, I'm going to read a book from Spain versus a book from India. The Indian book has like such a different sort of context to it and such a rich, deep history that if you're not aware of it, you might feel like what you say, Brian, you're missing things, and like that can be very off-putting
Well,
to people.
take this for example. What's the South American literature that's translated to English that does well?
Argentina.
Okay. And then like what kind of stories, what kind of novels, what like are they big family sagas?
I mean, there's some of that with the magical realism, but there's also like
Yeah.
the sort of grittiness of it. But I think Argentina being so influenced by Italian and by Italy and by
Yeah.
like that mixture, like feels very European. Like
Hmm.
the speech is closer to like the accent, even though it's distinctive and everyone makes fun of it in Argentina. I've had an easier time understanding Argentine people speaking Spanish than other South American countries or south of the border countries like Mexican because there's something like closer to like the Spanish European
It's
like
more European. Yeah.
yeah, it feels more like very discrete words, whereas in a lot of other dialects or whatever, I
I
have a
typically like
harder time.
I like German authors from Uruguay that are translated to English.
They're
Those are
solid.
typically I can understand those so much easier.
The plots are simple.
No, and it's probably like
They're
unfair,
one
but I'm
note.
just like as a mouth breathing American that only has like four stamps on a passport, right? Um, reading this, like you want to like wrap your arms around it by like, is this going to be like 100 Years of Solitude? Um, is there going to be like some like magic shit in it that I don't know about, or like gods or customs that I don't understand? But if it's got like some like sex and betrayal and family, I'm cool with that. I can get down with that.
Yeah.
Right. But it's the same way with like a New Yorker reading Faulkner or something.
Hmm.
Do they understand anything about Mississippi?
Mhm.
No.
No, right?
I mean,
But if
except
there's a
that
big
all the people down there are dumb. I'm sure that that's true.
exactly. No, it's just dumb
It's just
people
Brett
that live
Favre.
on plantations that are racist. That's all it is. It's nothing else. But
Brett
but
Favre.
like but if you put it in a small town and you build this mythology about a family around it, it becomes very like I can connect to that. I don't need to know all the customs. Like just keep me on board, make it where I can get it, and like I'll go for the ride. And so I'm noticing like this has a very like the first 10 chapters at least. To me, it has a very similar vibe where it's extremely approachable.
Yes.
It's you don't actually get it, but it's easy to get.
Yeah.
Like I don't know what it means for this or that, but like I understand borders, I understand border crossings, I understand aging parents and grandparents and having favorites, and like all of it is extremely understandable. It's written like clean, clean, clean.
Yeah.
And it sounds like a fairy tale with the way it's written. So like you can kind of just suspend your disbelief a little bit and like buckle up and enjoy the ride.
And
I
Yeah.
think that's a really great start.
Yeah. And it does feel like there is the sense of like, I don't know where we're going, but I trust that we're going to get somewhere and it's going to be somewhere
Yeah,
specific. Yeah.
yeah, because even the asides are kind of like
there,
charming. Like
Yeah.
everything's very charming. Like this is I
That's a
could
good
tell you
word.
the story about this, and then you tell us, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about this, and then we go
Hmm.
yes,
on to the next, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. So
there
like you
is
can
that.
almost see it like one of those stupid Netflix miniseries that wants to be really cute and is telling like vignettes. Like you can almost cinematically see it, just Like this could be a like you could see it as a Netflix show.
I could envision a Netflix show even depending on the like through the first 10 chapters. I don't remember if this happens as much, but there is kind of a Tristram Shandy like spirit behind it of like these
Mhm.
digressions and like looping back and like nothing moves, nothing happens in the first 20 chapters. The we get the beginning frame story just to put this in a position where the grandmother Ma, I guess, is uh crossing a border and maybe has been shot and is with another woman. And then you jump back in time and she's like become a widow, is lying in bed, doesn't want to get out of bed, doesn't want to do anything. And her family like sort of circles around that, trying to help her, do something, get going. And the only confusion I had in this whole thing, so to put aside like what people's expectations might be versus what the reality is, and to echo what you said, Brian, like the only thing I ever got lost on was like I was like, wait, whose kids are what? Like I got a little confused on like names of like people, and I think I've got this right, but there is a daughter and a son, and then the son is married, and they have at least two kids, um, that are grandchildren of the matriarch who is in bed moaning like on your audiobook. and not, and
So
not-
much moaning in the
so yeah,
No,
so
audiobook.
no, no.
but but that all totally made sense. And like we do get like little backstories on some of them, little bits and tales, like a whole thing. There's a whole digression that I don't think you'd have gotten to, Brian, about getting Reeboks. And is it
Oh yeah.
it's the wife of the son, the daughter-in-law of the matriarch
Yeah.
who like gets Reeboks and starts like going out and exercising and becoming like a yoga guru, and they're all just like, this seems weird. Like, what are you doing? Like, you can't. That's off base. Like you and your Reeboks. Like, and it's got this like sort of almost like. I mean, it's very light in the sense of like a sense of humor. It bounces. There's not like a huge, even though it starts with apparently a death. It doesn't really like have a lot of like that sort of heaviness to it through the whole thing. There is like a kind of fun that's being had, and in terms of the writing, it's also we mentioned the magical realism. There's one point that shows up in here, I think, in the 20 chapters that's actually like would refer to that. But then the rest of it is not that. It's like more linguistic. Like there's a lot of like kind of linguistic jokes in the second half of this section that we read that are much more like akin to something that you would expect from like an experimental like French writer or something like that. So like it's really for anyone who has any doubts about this in any way, it's super readable and it's very I found it to be very fun. Like I read this really quickly one night because I was just like, oh, I'll get started because this is gonna take a while. It's like 100 pages in my book. And I was done in like no time. And it was just like, oh, I'm into this. I could keep reading this for a while. Like I'm just enjoying this process compared to a lot of other books I've been reading that are heavier and denser and require a different level of concentration. I was just like, this is a great ride. I think this is funny. And you missed, Brian, the part that I think is super funny is that there is a grandson called the what is it, overseas son, because he leaves. He like gets a job where he's like runs companies in Australia and elsewhere in Europe and then in Australia. And his big deal is he doesn't understand laughter. And like he doesn't understand what he figures out that this is his big problem is he doesn't know how to laugh. And he's on a beach and like this little kid is like making jokes and picking on him and everyone's laughing. And he's like, I don't
Which,
get
fuck that
this.
little kid. Control your
Hey,
offspring.
hey, it seems like a good kid. He's just
No,
having
this
joy.
kid is walking around slapping strangers to get a rise out of them. Control your child.
I mean, I walk around and slap people now. Like, what's wrong? Like, let's do, like, that seems,
What would be cute is if the child is walking around with like a tiny little fan and like blowing air on people, something that you can't get
are
like
you,
that's cute. That's adorable. Like put your little electric pinwheel in my face. That's fine. Don't touch me.
yeah, I don't know. Someone's got to hang up here. But this
Control
guy
your
finally
children.
like tries to laugh. So for days and for weeks, so apparently he's like trying to grunt out like a smile and laugh, and everyone's like, "What is happening to this person? Like, there's something wrong with him. We don't
Or
understand."
like he's breathing heavy because he's like hoo he ha
And
ha.
they like go to the
Ah,
doctor, and the
ah.
doctor's like, "He's not sick. He's not sick. He's okay." And he's just like can't laugh. Which is very fun. I mean, it's a fun, like little digressive story that probably doesn't add anything to the greater narrative in the end. Like, it doesn't need to come back up. It doesn't need to become like a huge plot point, but it's like fun. And I feel like that sort of maybe that's like a part of like the kind of freeing storytelling that could happen within a book of this like large tapestry. But I thought that was enjoyable. I just enjoyed it. So Brian, out of the 10 chapters that you listened to, what did you think so far?
Yeah, I think I mirror a lot what you're saying. I'm I'm not like big into like overly poetic imagery, but I enjoy this imagery. It has a lot of kind of poetic language, um, some aphorisms, which okay, whatever. I can do those too if we must. But the actual like moving things forward, we're talking about the family and where they live and stuff. Like, yeah, it's a lot of fun. Super approachable, which makes sense why it probably won an award.
Yeah, yeah. Kaya, what would you think of this first
I
overview?
really like the descriptions of kind of the emotional hierarchy of the family. So like Ma is in her bedroom, the grandmother's in her bedroom, and there's like the one grandson who can get her to shift, right? Like the baby of the family, I guess. And like Brian was saying with aging parents and
No.
no,
In case
no.
anyone doesn't know what we're
Um,
going to, apparently that is the reader in the audiobook of this. It really leans into the noises that the grandmother, their protagonist makes.
yes. But I do like this. I do like the emotional hierarchy, and I do like the descriptions of the relationships, the kind of interpersonal relationships, and like the daughter, who um Betty, who was like sneaking out of the window to do things and then was like, I guess, kind of excommunicated from the family. But then Ma's like meeting her out in the bushes and bringing her food, and they're like giggling and like going and doing stuff together. And I liked the evolution of that where they're like, oh, this, Betty, this sister is often like she doesn't wear nice clothes. She basically is walking around like looking like a hobo, but then she's like getting accolades and like going to parties with the president is just this non-standard person. And then the family's like, oh, but she's so lonely. Like she must be alone, even though she's like at these presidential palace parties and things like that. Um, of just the dynamics that I really like the family dynamics and how those are being described. And like Brian said, I could see it being portrayed quite well in a TV show. And I think it would be equally entertaining. But it's very entertaining. I am enjoying that.
When I was there, I wrote down like, I don't know, a dozen Indian Netflix shows to watch. When I got back, I watched none of them, but there are a bunch that I might try and do that while we're doing this, at least bits and pieces, because there are some that seemed very cool and very interesting. However, I did none of that. But yeah, I totally agree. I could see this being like kind of a fun Netflix show. Maybe not, maybe a little twee. You can make it very twee, but or it could just be kind of, I don't know, it could be entertaining. But there is that thing like maybe what we're dancing on a little bit too is like the idea that it's going to be rather traditional. Like I
Mm,
think the books that get translated and published here tend to be either very contemporary, like the Uday Prakash ones that Jason did, or something that's very traditional, right? That's like, here is the kind of family saga, that sort of vibe to it. And this does have that, it has that sort of traditional vibe to it in terms of their setup. I don't think it says this, but it feels like it's an arranged marriage for the son because the wife, I think her name's Badu, is immediately like first day they're married, they come in and they're just like crying on the toilet and are like, what the fuck? And there's like a comment being like, that's how all brides on their first day are. They're just like, now I'm part of this family. Like, what am I going to do? And it has this feeling of like resignation. But then there's like the modern side to it where like the kid goes and works overseas. The daughter is like this high up, prominent like businesswoman, like of some sorts. I don't think it's explained. And that's interesting too, because it does then really point to the modernization and like the modern life, contemporary life in India at this moment, rather than this kind of like ginned up, here's what we expect. Like this is the stereotypical stuff of like, oh, where are the like the sort of like jungle flower stuff. Where's the Bollywood dances? Where's that like that kind of thing that I think like a stereotypical American reader might be expecting. Like this isn't that, and I think that that's great. And the fact that it got honored with this is fantastic for it to elevate the literature, but also elevate like a style that is more Tristram Shandy than it is, I don't know, like traditional Bollywood stuff.
Mhm. Makes me want some Reeboks.
Makes me want some malai kofta, but we're not
Yeah,
here.
also
When I
for
was reading
real.
this, I was like, should I make that tonight? I don't think I have all the ingredients, but I'm close. Uh, yeah. So there was, in terms of the cultural thing, I did mark one section where I was like, okay, here we go. This is what it is. On mine, it's page 82. It's in chapter wow, it's the long chapter, chapter 17. And it says something. Okay, so it's like he's trying to laugh, blah 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 blah. For example, when his colleagues were missing during the guest of honor speech, but 100% present at cocktail time, or when the secretary bought gujarati pizza that is sugar sprinkled, which is a nice gloss, like a quick gloss there to explain like what type of pizza that is. Or when someone proudly named a new flavor of their famous ice cream brand Jack the Ripper, and the canteen worker dubbed his son Lalu Hitler. These people aren't even illiterate, but they do such things nonetheless. If you say Gandhi, the other person will say Sanjay. If you say Ustad Amir Khan, then everyone thinks Amir Khan from QSQT. And that was the moment where I was like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what these things are, but like, I'm not lost. But there is like, it's retaining something of like the original flavor, but it's in the context of like making fun of this guy who can't laugh. So it's kind of somehow like more fun that way, I guess. How
And
you,
that one's named their serious son, right?
yeah, serious son who becomes overseas son when he goes to the other place. But I marked down it several times where I was like, huh, this is funny. I like this. Um, Other than that, though, in terms of the writing, what you said, Brian, about like the sort of like poetic language of it, I don't know, Kai, do you agree with this? I felt like the beginning chapters had much more of that than once it like settled into itself. There's also like an interesting moment where who the narrator is. There's one part later on where it's like, I now make appearance, and it's like, this isn't about me, though. I'm not going to say anything more. What comes next will not be from me. And has that sort of like interjecting narrator who is, I don't think, a physical presence within this family, although maybe, maybe too early to tell. But like it does have that level of like maybe not meta, but like awareness of the telling of the story, which I always find I really like, and I think like makes this like a richer sort of book for it in that sense, rather than being again just like a straightforward tale. There is something going on here in terms of the narrative strategies and structures. I think that's cool too.
Yeah. To your question, I don't remember enough to say. I don't think that it's less poetic or that there are fewer poetics than in the beginning of the chapters that Brian read as we move on. I think for me it would be more of just 70, 80 pages in, we're settling in, and it's
Okay.
not jumping out as much as it might be in the beginning. Because I remember, marking some stuff down in the first or in chapter 4, where it does have the wordplay, kind of the poetic wordplay about knots and
That's
knowing
what I
and
was
not.
looking for.
Yeah, and just kind of like I don't know if we're gonna have a chance to talk to Daisy
We
for
will
this, but
at the end.
okay, but like interesting, just like that's something that always interests me is how does it look in the original, and then how
Mhm.
does it, how do you get to the translation, and what that wordplay looks like in Hindi. Um, but yeah, I think it would be I would lean more toward I'm just settling into the book by this
Okay.
point. Because I am noticing things here and there, and there are paragraphs where it does you just have like words, words, words without any like multiple adjectives in a row, or multiple verbs in a row with no commas or anything like that. And I think that does fall into that camp of like the poetic sort of just like the stream or the flow of those ideas.
Yeah, that section that you're referring to is this paragraph, just to do the whole thing, because this is where I think it's like more like linguistically playful. But there's wind and rain and the puff of no that flies up between them and takes the form of a snippet, a scrap that flutters and flaps and flitters and swirls about the branch into a ribbon of desire that wind and rain unite to bind there. Each time they tie another knot, one more knot, a no knot, a no knot, a new knot, a new knot, a new desire, new, becoming the new refusal of no. Flutter, flitter, flap, flap, flap. Like it's much more like playing with this because the part that you can't see that I can't pronounce is like I a new knot is KNEW and then a new knot with NEW. And a no knot is KNOW KNOT and a no knot is NO comma NOT. So it's like it's the like on the visually on the page, it is playing with the sounds of all the words that are the same. And every time like when she says the no, Mada's it's like NYOO. So it is like it's pronounced, it's spelled it phonetically rather than spelled like just as the word itself. So there's
Yeah.
something like that that's going on, which I think is very cool too.
Mhm.
As a whole, like I don't know where this is going at all, unless it's leading to her like dying, which I suppose it would be. But it's I think like there's enough here in this beginning part that I'm like intrigued to know what's going to happen with these people, which is also like something that some of the books that we've covered on here do not do. Like you don't give a shit like what the plot is. It's just there for the like for the bit. And I'm going to make a very gross comparison here, but compared to Praiseworthy, which has some of this kind of like verbal excess and like sort of like drifty, circular, moving, a non-westernized storytelling
Mother,
form. What's
the
that?
mother, the
Yeah,
moth,
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, exactly. The Mother.
mother,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep. That sort of thing. I feel like that has no compelling, had nothing keeping me reading it after those first couple of chapters in terms of like what's the development going to be. And in this, I feel like the stories being told are have more propulsion to them than the sort of like eddy of like Sargasso Sea like elements or like flavor of Praiseworthy, which just
Mm.
kind of sat there in its same space, like circling, circling, circling. This feels like it has a little bit more forward drive. And I like the writing in here better than Alexis Wright because I feel like it's actually got a little bit more verve to it and less of like this kind of like show offy sort of vibe that maybe the that's unfair. Show off is an unfair word, but I think maybe you know what I mean. It's because more ostentatious and more like there. This seems a little bit more like storytelling.
Mhm.
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's trying to stay flexible. I mean, so it shifts gears into like the kind of poetic, and then it kind of shifts into being more like meditative, and then like you'll get little snippets of second person for some reason,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And then take you back out. So there's definitely like a playfulness, playing with the writing, playing with the language. She's doing a lot of interesting things, like just kind of throwing it all against the wall. But
Yeah.
it's not it's not chaotic. It's not hard, like it's not hard to grasp. So it's done very, very tastefully.
Agreed.
It's,
Agreed.
yeah, like you know you're in good hands. Basically, it's like you ever like sit back into a book and like, oh, this is they know what they're doing. I'm good. This will be good. I'm fine.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like you feel very I feel very comfortable
absolutely.
in her book,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Totally agree.
which is about as like high of praise as you can get, I think, as far as like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
we can nitpick this or that, but to know like, oh, I'm in good hands. It's like you go to a restaurant and the chef brings something out and you taste it and you're like, oh, this is gonna be a good meal. Like,
Yeah.
cool. I'll
Yeah.
take whatever. I don't care. Like
Yeah.
whatever you got, I'll have it. Right? Like
Yeah.
it's like that. It feels like that to me.
It's like going to the bear. Just a topical reference for for everyone watching the Hulu show.
Oh,
Indeed.
that's a club in San Francisco you could go to, the Bear. I don't know about food, but
Or Provincetown.
Leather Daddy.
Hell yeah.
Hey.
Let's do
I would
this.
say that the bear is like the topic of conversation in Wisconsin because there's one roaming around still. And
Oh, an actual bear?
yeah, like an
Yeah,
actual
there's one and it
bear.
Oh.
was in our backyard.
It looks it looks like a teenager in all the pictures that people posted, but it's like halfway up a tree and it's just like you've been caught skipping school, the look on its face every single time.
Busted.
Busted, yeah. Oh man.
There's
Yeah, I
there
had a bear that kept anytime I didn't bring the bird feeders in, it would knock them over and eat
That's
all the
this
bird
one
seed out of
does.
it.
Yep.
It's
Yeah,
freaking annoying.
that's what.
But I think this one got tagged because I haven't seen him in forever.
Yeah, that one. That's what happened in Wisconsin, but it also took down and drained the hummingbird sugar water that we'd made. So my theory is that it hit our house first, chugged that sugar water, and then just
It's
raged.
crazy. Yeah. There's one thing I just want to point out on in my book it's 70 or 85, I don't know what chapter it is, probably 17 still, but it says our wise author Intezar Hussain, that translated from Urdu is the book Basti that is available from New York Review of Books. So anyone reading this that comes across that and is curious who this author is, there is a book available by them that
Hmm,
you can access. So there's that.
nice.
Were there any other sections that stood out to you, Kaya, or you, Brian, within those first 10? I'm trying to find out like what was before and after 10. I'm having a hard time like parsing what was where exactly, to be honest. I did mark 10 as one of the pages that I thought was really good though, because chapter 10 is like two paragraphs, and this is one of the ones where you're talking about of the like sort of intervention. So like enough, let's get back. Although the tail has no need for a single stream, it is free to run, flow into rivers and lakes, into fresh new waters. But for now, we must insist on not straying, so for the time being, we simply won't. Let's return to where we began the story, to the land of the two women. So that sort of like pause, recap, move
Mhm.
through. I am a sucker for that sort of stuff, 100%. So, there we are. I also want to say that I think I may be wrong about this, but I believe that this version was published and then the Tilted Access and then the one in the US. I know the one in the US comes after she wins the Booker Prize. The book was not available here
Interesting.
until later. Um, but there's like a place that it was written and published for and then translated or moved out of there. So, and it was pretty quick afterwards. Didn't talk anything about the author, but we can do that later when we have a little bit more information about her. Any other sections that you were interested in, Kaya?
Um, we didn't talk about it, and I think it probably will show up more often later on, but the cane that they get for
That's the
Ma
magical
is,
realism point.
yes, that is the magical realism point. You'll get there, Brian, but it's overseas sun, I believe, buys her a cane, and it like has butterflies and a rainbow, and it like is retractable or something. I don't know. I think it's like all those things and none of those things. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, if it plays out. If it's just left here, I don't know. I might be frustrated, but
But because I was just envisioning it as like a fancy looking cane.
yeah. But
I
it
hope
seems like they make it sound like a portal, almost like it has some sort of properties that will be, if not life-changing, at least
if
quite
this book becomes like a
magical.
sci-fi book out of nowhere, that would be wild.
I mean, you do have this cover where she has the cane at the bottom and no cane
Oh,
at
it
the
came
top. So you've
there.
got like the David Mitchell-esque like split of
I
things.
don't know that I like that cover, but I don't know that I definitely don't like this cover.
Well, that's why I took this one because I like the cover better.
It's better than this one for sure, but I think the tilted axis one, which fits their sort of their structure with like the line on the angle, I think that that's the one that I like the best.
I'm gonna get the one of the woman looking away so you can't see her face. I don't know if that's one, but there should be one like
That's
that.
on every. There's that. There's like a New York Times article. I think it's like also like women like looking like you're saying like looking down at like famous pieces of art. Like there's like all these like cover trends that
Yeah.
the shitty ass New York Times, which should go fuck itself to the grave, had an article about. Segue. Screw the New York Times. Anyone who writes enough like crazy anti-trans op-eds to be quoted several times by Clarence Thomas can go burn.
Yep.
Get bent. Like, fuck you, Pamela Paul.
Trans
Um,
rights are human rights.
that's my little soapbox for today. Brian, I don't know if you have a favorite line or a section to like
I
go off.
do.
Oh, good.
No, no, no.
Oh.
I'm not getting up. No. Yee. It does that for 30 seconds. I'm not even kidding.
I wonder if they asked for pronunciation assistance for those ones.
Is this more of a E or a E?
Yes, is she angry or tired?
Yeah.
Oh my
I
God.
have my favorite line on
Favorite line.
page 12 for my edition. It's the first line of chapter 5. Who can really hate their own? But certainly they can exasperate. Get up.
No.
I mean, that is the next line. No, sunshine.
Is it really?
No. Soup. No.
Oh my God. I am looking for something, but I will just go for this is the one that I was talking about, but I did mark it as one that I liked. It's talking about the Bahu and the Reeboks, but also like the beginning. It says, nor in this, that she departed for her marital home to make her dreams come true, feeling utterly, utterly alone in this world, an unfamiliar home, unfamiliar folk, unknown customs. Like most new brides, the new daughter-in-law of this home sat down to weep on the very first day. She'd gone to use the toilet and it had got blocked. So, like, I like going from like the also reminds me of the episode of The Bear where they have the wedding and like the chaos of that and becoming part of this big family and then you go to the toilet and it's the shitter is clogged. That seems like a very Chad line to end on. Let me look at where we're going to, Brian, so that you know.
Chapter 35. We're going to chapter 35. It's the end of part one.
You is that right? Are you not making that up?
Why would I make stuff up? I'm here to keep us on track,
We're on Brian's schedule
to
now.
keep us grounded.
That's so funny. Yeah, so okay. So there we go. And that will be next week. If you're listening to this, you can watch us on YouTube. You can subscribe through Apple Podcasts and through Spotify. There is the Substack 3% problem.substack.com, which you can subscribe to so you'll get notification of every one of these episodes along with other information about open letter books and various other things. There's also the Mining the Delkey Archive Substack, which is just that, miningthedelkeyarchive.substack.com. And just as a plug, we talked about this last week, but there is a 3% podcast in which I talked to Tom Comita about their book, People's Choice Literature, which used data and large language model situations to write what should be the most popular novel and the most unpopular novel based on all this data and background information that they acquired. And it's an interesting conversation. I think you would like it, Brian, because it is very much in the like, how do you do this? Like the stuff that I think you write like to sort of mock is a kind of like what they were doing, where they're like, you read these like James Patterson, Dan Brown, whoever, and they repeat things in this certain pattern. They do these things. And when you read it within the context of someone trying to do that, you're like, this is so like bad in like a good way. It's like Mulligan Stew sort of vibe to it. But like
Blue.
honest, yeah, blue and puzzles. It's all blue puzzles all the way down. And then the unpopular one or the unwanted one is pretty funny too. It's overall pretty interesting. It's led me into like it's backed up by we watched the Pavements documentary that it's very weird and like a kind of Hall of Mirrors situation where things are real and fake and happened and didn't and it's all mixed together. And the most popular novel sort of fits that in the sense of like, are you trying to make this really good or what are we going here? So I would listen to that. It's great. Otherwise, tell your friends, rate, review us, all that kind of fun stuff. We'll be back next week with more of Tomb of Sand and hopefully an interview with Jason Greenbaum about Indian literature as a whole.
So when we say Indian, do we mean